Hello, church. Not too long ago, I was speaking with a man in his 80s about the pandemic that we're dealing with right now. And I was very curious as to what his thoughts were on the pandemic. He, of course, is much older than I am. And having experienced twice as much as I have experienced, I was curious how he perceived, how he was processing what it was we were going through. And he told me that he had never seen anything like this. He had never seen the world respond to such a problem in the way that it has. In particular, I think in his mind was the panic factor. And last night I noticed an interview by a co-founder of Home Depot, a man in his 90s who spoke very well. And again, I was super interested in how he was going to explain the pandemic through his mind and perspective. It was interesting because he said the same thing. He had seen wars, he had seen economic ups and downs, he had seen a lot of crises over the course of 90 years here in the world and in America, and he said he had never seen anything like this. And it was the same response. He had never seen the panic like this. He had never seen the response like this. He had never seen something so quickly change the world and change our society. It's interesting to hear from people of different backgrounds, different ages, different experiences, and it reminds us that not everyone processes the world and its problems the same way. Age and experience probably are the greatest factors in what impacts how we see things and how we process elements. A man in his 80s is not going to process the present pandemic perhaps the same way a 40-year-old man is going to process it. And I think a 40-year-old man, especially if he has a family, is not going to process it the same way as a 20-year-old man. And certainly a 20-year-old man is going to process differently this pandemic than a boy in the second grade. Age and experience impact how we think and how we view the world in which we're living. I think faith also plays a major component in that, but age and experience would be the biggest factors. I learned not too long ago that I can easily forget that not everyone thinks the same way as I do. I think we're all guilty of that at times. We go through life and we forget how diverse we are, we forget how different we are, how unique we might be. And when we go through experiences, we have to remind ourselves that not everyone views things the same. My wife and I went to Sherwin-Williams, I think 2 weeks or so ago. We had to get some paint for a project here at church, and I couldn't go in. Like many stores, they've changed policies and procedures, and so you have to call in your order. You then can go pick it up. And so I called it in. I went to go open the door to go in. They looked at me like I had the plague because the door was locked, and they just told me essentially, call. So I made a phone call and said I just placed an order. I need to pick up my gallon of paint. They told me to meet an associate in the back. So I went and parked in the back, and out came an associate with my gallon of paint. Again, they approached me very cautiously. They saw me as a potential threat. This is what everybody is doing now because of the fears in our society. And I went to get the can of paint. It was raining out, so I was going a little quicker. And I got the can of paint, thanked them, got back in the car. And my wife reminded me of what I didn't see. And she says, you have to slow down, honey. Some people are just really uncomfortable right now. And I expressed some frustration with how society is behaving, in particular, seeing each other as threats. And she made a very wise statement. She said, hon, not everybody has the faith that you have. And it was a great moment for me to sit back and say, yeah, you're absolutely right. And she wasn't exalting my faith as though it was some great faith. She was pointing out that some people don't have faith at all. Some people don't have faith in God. They don't have faith in Christ. Some people don't have, in fact, most people don't have any confidence in their eternal destiny. And so for that reason, this pandemic has scared the snot out of folks because they think if they catch it, they'll die, and if they die, they don't know where they're going, and so they're very uneasy. It was a great moment for me to stop and say, yeah, I may view this very differently simply because death isn't as scary for a person who knows what awaits them, thanks to Jesus Christ. Now, it's one thing to miss the fact that a store associate may not think the way you do. But it's entirely another thing to miss the fact that your children at home may not think like you do. In fact, Most of our children do not and will not think the way we do because they don't have the advantage of age and experience. And our children and teenage children also don't have typically the advantage of faith. They don't have the advantage of exercising their faith. They may be believers. They may be following you to church. They may be following your faith in Christ. But your children, your young teenage children, shouldn't have the same faith you do because you've lived longer. You should have exercised your faith longer. They're still figuring it out. They're still vetting it. And so as they view the pandemic through their eyes, it's not going to be through the eyes of your age, your experience, or even of your faith. We have to remember, now more than ever, that our children need us to help them through this pandemic. I think it's easy for us adults, we who are responsible to pay the mortgage, we who are responsible to keep the utilities going, to keep the vehicle going, to make sure there's food in the cupboards, we who have careers, we who have jobs and insurance to pay for, it's easy for us to get consumed with everything that's happening, all the changes that are going on, and forget the fact that we have children in our homes who are watching the same news we're watching. Their little ears are hearing the same reports we're hearing. Their little minds are processing the same things that we're hearing, which is how many cases in New York City, in New York State, what the government is doing, churches that can't meet. They're hearing about the deaths. They're hearing all these things. They're seeing all these things, and they're trying to process it in their own minds that have less age, less experience, and less faith. And if we're not careful, we'll become so consumed with our concerns, so consumed with our responsibilities, so consumed with our uncertain future that we'll forget on either side of us or in front of us our little minds that are not processing this the same way we are. And we have a duty as parents to make sure we can help guide our children through this, because this will define for many of them the way of life for the rest of their lives. For our children and for our teenage children, this moment is the defining moment of their generation. There may be, in fact, I suspect there will be plenty more crises for their lives, but this is the one that's defining them. For my generation, it was 9/11. I was a 20-year-old man, newly married. That changed life for us. That put life in perspective for my generation. And for my parents' generation and for my grandparents' generation, there were events, whether it was Pearl Harbor or a World War or the Great Depression or the Vietnam War, there were events in each of our generations that form us and form our future. And right now, our young children are facing something that none of our generations have faced before. Again, speaking to that 80-year-old man, that 90-year-old man hearing his interview, this is new. This is different. And so as we try to process it and figure out what it is we have to do and how it is to face it, we have to make sure that our children are given our direction to help them through it. And so I want to give you just a few basic recommendations right now as parents to help you parent in a pandemic. We can't ignore the responsibilities we have. And number one, I'd like to encourage you to keep a close eye on your kids. Keep a close eye on your kids. I already referred to how consumed we can be with the news, how consumed we can be with each update that comes through the day as to who has it and who has gotten better or who has died, what the government's going to do, how the economy is going to handle this, what money is being sent to us, and all these things go on, and we can get so distracted that we can leave our children alone without the direction they need, and they are then going to be handicapped to deal with this because they're not equipped to truly process this without the help of an adult, in particular a father and a mother. We have the responsibility to know our children. This isn't the school's responsibility. This isn't the government's responsibility. This isn't the church's responsibility. This isn't the responsibility of the guidance counselor or the psychiatrist. This is the responsibility of a mom and a dad to know our children, to look at them, to observe them, and to see how they're processing this. Do we see fear? Do we see panic? Do we see a callousness? Which is possible. But we've got to see and know what's happening. This will take more than just a daily, how you doing, kiddo? This is going to require our keen observation to look at their eyes, to look at their countenance, to see how they're behaving, what they're doing. Remember, even though our children have seen movies and TV shows and played video games that deal with traumatic and dramatic situations, they've learned about it in school, hopefully, as far as history, even with pandemics and history. But this is the first time in their lives that they've had to process a real threat in their backyard. School shootings, at least in this area, have not happened that have forced our kids to process it. Natural disasters in this area, our kids don't have to process those things. Wars haven't been in this area. Pandemics have not been in this area. So for the first time in their young minds and in their young lives, they have to process a real threat. At least what they're told on the news or by their teachers. They're emphasizing, of course, social distancing. Every screen they turn on, everything they hear. And the threat is, if you get this, could I die? Could you die? Because people are dying. So they're processing things that are new to them. And I like what the book of Proverbs says. In Proverbs 31, verse 27, in referring to a mom with virtue, or the virtuous mother, it says of her in that passage that she looketh well to the ways of her household and eateth not the bread of idleness. She's looking well. She's taking the time to observe her kids, to study her kids, and to know them so she can help them, guide them in whatever issues they're having. And it says she doesn't eat the bread of idleness. She's not wasting time doing things that won't help her children. We have to be careful right now. We do have extra time, many of us. We're working at home or we're unemployed. We can't go do all the events we're typically doing. We're not shopping all the time. We're at home. And what we shouldn't do is become idle as parents, spending useless time watching the news that are reporting the same things for hours. We shouldn't spend useless time combing social media. We should be spending our time wisely on the behalf of our kids, looking well to the ways of our household. Secondly, I'd like to encourage you to maintain an open dialogue with your kids. Maintain an open dialogue with your kids. Make sure you establish a household pattern, policy, situation, condition where your kids know they can talk to you at any time about anything. That they don't have to wait till the dinner table. That they don't have to wait even till you're done with work. I'm all about setting parameters where your kids know you have things to do, or you have mom and dad time, or husband and wife time, work time. I'm all about setting those parameters so that your children know that they're not the most important thing in the world. However, right now during the pandemic, our kids need to know that they can ask those questions at any time. That they can talk about what it is they're feeling at any time. You know, kids are interesting. Ideas come into their heads, feelings come into their heart. They come and go so rapidly. Kids can be concerned one moment and then running to play the next moment. And we have to be careful that we don't limit the thoughts and feelings that come into our children's souls to just one weekly conversation or one daily meeting or dinner table time. If they don't talk about them when they're thinking about them, if they don't bring it up when they're feeling that feeling, there's a good chance they're going to forget it. Or forget it for a while. And so we want to make sure we give our kids the time. I love what Moses told the Jewish people in the Old Testament. When Moses received the law, Judaism, he gave it to the parents, the adults, the families, and they were responsible to teach their children. And when he told them to teach their children, listen to what he said in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse number 7. He said, "Thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up." Meaning, all the time. If you're in your home, talk about these things to your kids. When you're out and about, talk to your kids about these things. When you get up in the morning, talk to your kids about these things. When you go to bed at night, talk to your kids about these things. Spend time wherever you are, whatever you're doing, talking to your children and letting them know that they can talk to you. Establish this household habit where your kids know they can talk and your kids know you can talk. It's a time of constant communication. Life lessons are best taught not at even the dinner table or at a daily family devotion time, both of which are excellent and good. But your most important life lessons are taught in real time, when you see something on the news, when you see something when you're out and about, when you experience something together, right there and then is the time to discuss important issues and matters. Right now, probably more than ever, you have a chance to talk to your kids about the government, about politics. Most of the time, kids aren't interested in politics. But now, politics impact your kids. The governor is going to talk about, the Erie County executive is going to talk about, the mayor is going to talk about schooling. And that impacts your kids. So now they're semi-engaged. You have a chance to talk to your kids about what it means for a Christian to submit to the government, even when you disagree. Because right now, there's all kinds of opinions about the government and the decisions they're making. Well, right now, you have a chance to teach them life lessons. You have a chance right now to teach your kids about hygiene. Not only is it good for them, but it's good for other people. Not only is it good for them and for other people, but it's a great Christian testimony. You can talk to your kids about the cleanliness in the Bible, in particular the Old Testament, and how it mattered to God to put it into Jewish law. You can talk to your kids about how they should love people despite the present solution of social distancing and seeing everyone as a threat. Teach your kids, talk to them in real time about loving people and not seeing them as a threat. Right now is a time to talk. Have some open dialogue. Cultivate thought, encourage questions, and welcome conversation. Peter said in 1 Peter 3:15 that we are to sanctify the Lord God in our hearts. And he said, be ready to give an answer to every man that asketh the reason of the hope that is in you. That's also about your kids. You should be presenting a approach, a response to this that makes them wonder and ultimately ask questions and be ready to discuss it. Our children need conversation. Number 3, I'd encourage you in your parenting during this pandemic to demonstrate the Christian response to crises. Show your children how a Christian should respond to crisis. Now, it's one thing to tell your kids how to do something. It's an entirely different thing to show your kids how to do something, isn't it? It's all about example for children. It's great to talk to them. We just talked about the need to do that. But let's be honest. Children don't remember nearly as much as what they hear as what they do, what they see. That's why kids love videos, video games, movies, TV shows. Visuals grab the attention and the memory of children more than listening does. And so right now, we need to show our children how a Christian should respond to this pandemic. Solomon in Proverbs chapter 23 said to his son, he said, my son, give me thine heart and let thine eyes observe my ways. Watch me. And we should be saying essentially the same thing to our kids. Hey kids, son, daughter, watch me. This is how we respond to crisis. This is how we respond to concerns. This is how we respond to our life being turned upside down. How does a Christian respond to a pandemic? Well, we're not afraid. We're not afraid of death. Christians are supposed to lay hold on eternal life. How does a Christian respond to a pandemic? Well, a Christian responds in faith, not in fear. How does a Christian respond to a pandemic? A Christian responds by praying and not panicking. How does a Christian respond to a pandemic, a nationwide, a global pandemic? Well, we don't put our trust in princes. We don't try to put our trust in politicians. We put our trust in the Lord because we believe God is sovereign and God's eyes are upon us. And our children need to see our response so that we give them an example to follow, not just now, but our children are going to have many more crises throughout the rest of their life. This is not the last. This is only the first. It may not look like this. It may be different. But whatever it is, we need to show our children how a Christian takes the Word of God and employs his faith and stands strong in times of crises. Our children need stability. Years from now and for the rest of their lives, our children will remember how their parents behaved. You can talk to a person whose parents went through the Great Depression, and they went through the Great Depression as children, and you can ask them how it was. You know what they'll almost always remember? They'll almost always remember their parents and what they did. Oh, I remember my dad and how he had us go out and work 2 jobs. Or I remember how my mom, she made food this way to get us through the Great Depression. Our children are going to remember how we behave, how we act. They're going to remember years from now, Yeah, that was a wild time. And I remember my parents, they prayed faithfully. They read their Bible faithfully. Or they're going to say, yeah, my parents just binged on the news. My parents stockpiled all kinds of toilet paper and food, and my parents were freaking out. They're going to remember how we act. We have to show them, both now for stability's sake and in the future for example's sake, how a Christian responds to crises. So I'd encourage you to do those. I'd also encourage you, number 4, to focus on the facts and not fear. Fear is such a dangerous spirit to entertain, such a dangerous thing to welcome into your homes. Proverbs chapter 23, the chapter I just referenced, where a father was speaking to his son. The same father said to his same son moments earlier, he said, buy the truth and sell it not. Also instruction, understanding, he said, and wisdom. The facts of that verse are so important. The facts are this: truth brings wisdom, understanding, and instruction. If you don't have truth, if you have falsehood, it will bring foolishness. It will bring senselessness. It will bring insanity. I've been most concerned through this pandemic that we are living under a cloud of fear in the whole world. The panic is really unbelievable, how quickly it came and how quickly it's consumed all of mankind. And I have noted that this fear has really produced foolishness throughout the world. Now, I'm not here to tell you that social distancing isn't the answer and isn't the right thing. I'm not here to say that quarantine isn't important. I think there's an Old Testament precedent for that, actually. So I'm supportive of good hygiene. I'm supportive of cleanliness and some elements of social distancing and some elements of quarantines. But I think it has gotten to a place where fear has made so many of the decisions look foolish. I read an article recently about Hawaii. My wife and I enjoyed a great anniversary trip there recently, and so my browser on my phone always gives me news stories about Hawaii. And one popped up the other night, and it said, couple flies into Kauai, went to the grocery store, and they were arrested. Long and short is, when you go to Hawaii, as of right now, you have to be quarantined in your hotel room or your house, whether you're a visitor or a resident, for 14 days. And so this couple flew into Kauai. They were told there in the airport to go to your hotel and spend the next 14 days in your hotel room. You're quarantined. Well, the police watched them leave the airport and go the wrong direction from where they said their hotel was. The police pulled them over, slapped them on the wrist, and said, we told you to get to your hotel room. What do they do after that? They go to the hotel room. But because they're in a foreign land, a strange land to them, they had to get food. So they went to the grocery store. That was a mistake because the police were watching them. The police then saw their rental car in the grocery store parking lot, waited for them to come out of the grocery store, put handcuffs on them, and took them to jail, arrested them for going to the grocery store. I understand the quarantine concerns. I understand the possibility of spreading disease. But people have to eat food if they're going to live beyond COVID-19. To me, it just speaks of foolishness. I've saw reports recently of southern farmers literally plowing their crops over. They can't ship their crops to stores to people who need them because of the infrastructure of America right now being obsolete because of the national shutdown. To me, again, it just speaks of the foolishness that we have placed such an emphasis on medical needs and medical concerns that in many cases we have ignored the obvious, that people need to eat beyond this pandemic. And there are many elements and experiences that people would see. It just doesn't make sense. It's wild. Cars getting ticketed for being in a parking lot with their windows up for Easter services, where you can go to the gas station and pump your gas out of your car and touch the handle that someone else touched and be within 3 feet of somebody. We're just not using our heads, and that's because of fear. People are panicking. We have to help our children who are going to experience some level of fear in their little minds when they're told death is possible. We have to help our children resist that spirit of fear, teach them the facts. You know, the facts bring you a sense of comfort right now. If you, moms and dads, are telling your kids that COVID-19 is a death sentence, you're not doing your children any favors. You're only producing fear. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of adults, whether they're in administrations or they're in schools or they're in hospitals or even in homes, a lot of adults are scaring kids right now so as to teach them proper hygiene, to get through to them. You can't go and just touch this and that. I can appreciate the need to teach our children hygiene. What a great opportunity this presents us. However, if you're giving your kids or any child the impression that they will die if they get this virus, you're not giving them the facts. And as a result, you're producing fear in them, and that fear will settle into their young minds and produce a habit that every time they hear of something like this in the future, they will be afraid. And the spirit of fear will dominate these children for the rest of their lives. They'll be afraid of everything and anything. Their young minds, their young souls are being formed. And we need to teach our children how to deal with fear. I also have to say this. If you're a parent right now who's spending a lot of time on the internet, you're seeing YouTube videos or reading articles, and you're embracing any level of conspiracy, I would urge you, I would beg you even, to leave that venue. Right now, all the conspiracy theorists are not going to help you and your family in any way. In any way. I have to say this. It's my opinion that most conspiracies are put out there by agents of fear. And I'm speaking spiritually now to Christian parents. Conspiracies, many of them, if not most of them, are put out there so that people will become distracted and ultimately subtracted. Meaning, you'll get so distracted from the truth, from the purpose you're here, from the goals you should be having as a Christian parent, that you become subtracted from the kingdom, subtracted from the church. You become useless. These conspiracies that are flying around that people are grabbing onto, they're not based on facts. There's nothing biblically, of course, that would lead you to believe some of these things. And if your children hear you talking about these things, embracing them, and if your children are being taught them, you're just encouraging your children to look for things, in many cases, that don't exist. And you're teaching your children to always be looking over their shoulder, to be afraid of everything, to read too far and deep into it. You know, the reality of this pandemic is very simple. We are dealing with a very contagious virus that is dangerous to a small minority of people. The reality and truth of the pandemic right now, secondly, is that the vast majority of people will survive this and life will go on. But most importantly, the reality of this pandemic is that nothing we're experiencing in the world right now has impacted heaven and changed God. God is still God. His eyes are still upon us. He is still on his throne. The word of God is still true. Heaven is still our home for those of us who believe in Christ. And the souls of men is still our mission. And so let's focus on the facts. And let's teach our children to embrace truth. Because truth, we're told, will make us free. Free from what? Free from bondage. Bondage to fear. I was walking through Walmart with my children, all three of them, on Saturday, and it was a little busier there because I think folks were scrambling to get Easter candy and Easter celebrations in their homes going. And there were a lot of people, and you could just see a ton of uneasiness, a lot of fear in that store at that time. People had masks on. Families were huddled closely together. There was uneasiness when there were two carts in the aisles. And Walmart was trying to put arrows now on the floor for one-way shopping. I don't know how that's going to ever work. But it just made everybody very uncomfortable. And we got into the checkout line. My kids went into two different lines, or I went in one line, they went in another line because they were getting some things for themselves. And I had to remind them from an aisle over or from a line over, hey, guys, you need to back up. You need to give that person in front of you their space. And they said, oh. And I made a small comment that I felt was appropriate. I have to be sensitive. And my wife reminds me of that. But I said, careful or the social distancing police will get you. I said that to hopefully lighten the mood because some people were looking around at us. And I could see a smirk or two on some people's faces who heard me because they're so tense right now. They're looking for someone to give them some hope, some light, and humor in some cases gives that opportunity. Anyways, we leave Walmart, and one of my kids says to me right there as we're walking out, they said, wow, Dad, you can just see the fear on people. You can feel the fear among people. And I said, yeah, and we talked a little bit more about it, but I felt as a parent that I was doing my duty to make sure that my children understood the danger of fear, that they were aware of its presence, because life's going to give our kids lots of reasons to fear. And if they're fearful, they will lead to foolish decisions. We need to give our children a reason to be courageous. Why? Because we're not going to get COVID-19? No, that has nothing to do with it. We can't boast ourselves of tomorrow. We don't know what a day may bring forth. We have no confidence in ourselves. But fear is not what God gives us. He gives us a spirit of power, a spirit of love, and a spirit of a sound mind. God does not want us to be afraid. And Psalm 91 specifically tells us we should not be afraid of the pestilence that walketh in darkness. So, number one, I'd encourage you to keep a close eye on your kids. Number two, maintain an open dialogue with your kids. Number three, demonstrate the Christian response to crises. Number four, focus on facts, not fear. And number five, embrace the opportunity for extra time with your kids. This has impacted everyone. It's impacted everything we do right now. It's impacted places we go or can't go. And many of you are home working from home, or you're unemployed, so you're home. All of us can't come to church, so we're not coming to church throughout the week or on weekends. If your kids are public school or Christian school, they're not at school. If your kids are in sports, they're not participating in sports. We're not shopping. So we're spending more time together. And I don't know what the future holds. I think the future is going to get busy again. I think we'll get back to our busy lives again. But it may be even more busy. The economy, it's in danger right now, and the government is going to do everything they can. We hope God will be merciful to us. But the reality is the economy is going to be severely impacted for some time. Will we have our jobs back? Will we have to work 2 jobs? Will we have to work multiple jobs to pay the bills? There's a good chance we're going to be busier, working more to pay for our bills. Sports should get back going. Schools should get back going. We're going to be busy again. And so right now, what I would encourage you to do is just savor this chance to spend this time together, this downtime together. Solomon, again, in Ecclesiastes, he spoke a lot about the life that we live and how it's not certain and it's so unpredictable. This has taught us that Solomon's so true, hasn't it? But he urged his readers not to put all their eggs in the basket of this life. He would often say throughout that book, everything under the sun is vanity, it's unfulfilling, meaning you're going to work so hard for something and it's just not going to meet expectations. It's not going to be there to meet expectations. And that's true. You can work really hard for the future, but we don't know if you're going to even have a future. We don't know if we're going to survive not just this pandemic, but today, a car crash, any number of issues could take us or our loved ones from us. So what Solomon encouraged people to do was to focus on the gift of the present. He said these words in Ecclesiastes 5:19. He said, "Every man also to whom God hath given riches and wealth, and hath given him power to eat thereof, and to take his portion, and to rejoice in his labor, this," he said, "is the gift of God." Meaning, if you have food in your cupboards, in your refrigerator, if you can put food on your table, if your family can sit with you, your kids can be at that same table, and you all have the health to cut your own food and to eat your food and to drink your beverage and to sit there and be together right now, today, Solomon said that's a gift. That's a gift of God. And I would urge you right now, if you have the health, if you have the food, if you have the home to be in, to enjoy your family, in particular your children, enjoy it. It's a gift of God. I have to say, right now our kids can't be in any sports. They're usually in sports, and we're busy every night of the week, running here, there, or everywhere. And right now, life has slowed down substantially for our family. A few of our kids are still working, so we have to run in once in a while here and there to work. But in general, we've got more time than we typically do, especially right now in the springtime. And it's been enjoyable. It's been real enjoyable. And I'm sure you're experiencing the same slowdown. Listen, savor the time together. Enjoy the extra time while you have it. Because we just don't know how much longer we're going to have to enjoy this time. We don't know what life's going to be like in the coming weeks, months, or years. And again, we don't know what tomorrow holds. for the life and the lives of our family members. So take this gift of God, this ability to be with your family, the ability to enjoy each other, unwrap that gift and savor it. Take walks together. Take bike rides together. Have campfires together. Play games together. Watch a clean movie or show together. Do things together. Don't let this pass us, the opportunity to go by, because we're all going to cherish the time we have with each other more because of this. So savor this time. These are just a few practical suggestions I would make for you parents as you try to parent in a pandemic. Remember, your children need you. They need you now more than ever to help guide them through this most influential time in their lives. We have an opportunity, parents. We have a responsibility, but we have an opportunity to help guide our children and to help form them early in their childhood to become prepared for the difficulties and challenges of life. May God bless you. Have a great night.